Hey, GP learners. There's various different resources out there to try and help you in primary care, particularly depending on which system you use. And many of you have heard of a particular system called Primary Care Pathways. In this episode, I speak to the company's founder, who talks about his journey over what he's been creating, what he's currently been doing with our lovely healthcare situation and pandemic, and also what potentially is coming in the future. In this episode, I'm joined by a GP who works down in Norfolk, is the founder of Primary Care Pathways, and a pretty awesome tech GP as well. I'm joined by Dr. Dustyn Saint. How are you doing, Dustyn?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, doing well.
How are you getting on this morning?
Yeah, good. Good. Doing well.
Cool. So I know we've been talking for quite a while, and in terms of both on the internet as well as various other routes and things. And what I've really enjoyed, particularly over the past few months with our bizarre pandemic situation that we've had, is that when there have been people that have been just literally churning out resources, I have to admit your name is definitely top of the pile, and you've been doing some really amazing stuff. I guess I wanted to get you on to share with our EGP learners various things that you've been up to, and also what Primary Care Pathways does, because some of them may not have heard of the company itself and the resources it can produce. So first of all, tell us a little bit more about your journey to develop it.
So Pathways is kind of a result of me working in my practice over a lengthy period of time and thinking, how can we try and do stuff smarter? How can we make life easier for GPs and for their team members? How can we kind of try to streamline some of the really common everyday stuff that we do day in, day out, and just make it a bit simpler than we otherwise would have had it. And really, to start off with, it was just an opportune meeting between myself and a chap called Will Bamber, who, when I joined my practice, 8 years ago, he was the IT lead, and he said to me, well, you're the youngest GP in the practice. You look like you're interested in IT. I can see you've got a whizzy smartphone. How about we have a bit of a chat about how we could do some of this stuff? And fast forward kind of 6 months later, him and I had spent many hours kind of holed up together, kind of thinking about different bits and pieces. And we'd really kind of, it's the same way that most stuff evolves in primary care. You usually have a clinical incident, you figure out there's a need for something, and then you go away and build something that kind of sorts out that kind of clinical risk situation. Or one of our team members had come to us and said, oh, this is really bugging me, and this seems to be something that we're spending a lot of time doing. And you think, well, there's a better way of doing that. And you think, how can we kind of try and circumnavigate that? And we just did that really just for our own practice to start off with. And then I think one of my partners said, oh, you should go to the National Users Group, because I think you'd probably like it there. You'd find a lot of people who were like you, and you'd be able to kind of like chat to them about what you're doing. And we went along and sat through a whole series of kind of lectures where we thought, yeah, that's cool. That's stuff that like we're doing and is similar to the kind of thoughts that we'd had. And chatted to people about what we were up to. And then I think we went back the next year, and we were asked to present that year, I think. So we did, about some of the stuff that we've been doing. And then people said, oh, could we have some of that? And so we started sharing some of it, and we got to a stage where we had a cohort of maybe 10, 15 odd surgeries who we were sharing stuff with. And then we started to realise that actually with that comes some support and some development and those kind of things. And we went back, I think, the following year to the National Users Group and presented some of the outcomes for some of the stuff that we've been doing. And NHS Digital kind of took us to one side and said, well, where's your governance processes for doing this? Like, you're logging into these people's systems and installing stuff. Like, what if it does something that it shouldn't? And like, they're going to come back to you, and then there's going to be a legal liability. And some of your stuff looks a bit like a medical device. What about kind of MHRA regulation? Have you thought about that? So came back to my practice and sort of said to my partners, we've either got to stop sharing stuff quite so widely, or we've got to do it in a more formal way where we've got those kind of IG requirements sorted out, and we've got insurance, and we've got regulatory kind of things sorted out, and we've got to do it more formally. And we had that conversation and said, well, let's have a go at it. It seems, and I think I was pretty naive at the time. I kind of thought, my not slightly naive thinking was, if you could take a day's worth of locum for every 5,000 patients that you have as a practice and contribute that to one organisation, I thought, well, that's dead easy. Then that organisation's just got the resources it needs to be able to do what it needs to do, and that will just work. which looking back, you think, yeah, that was slightly naive, but nonetheless, we've kind of tried to keep to that basic premise of kind of we wanted to just be a place where if you were a practice who needed some tools, then you could come to us and we'd either have it, or if we haven't got it, that we'd go away and work on it, and then it would become part of the kind of tool set that was available for everybody. So then I guess what happens with time is you start to grow that tool set like massively. So we've kind of gone from having quite a few templates and quite a few searches and a few kind of like QoF related bits and pieces and a few other kind of quality bits and pieces to now having a massive tool set that kind of covers everything that you'd really want, from recall to monitoring to kind of every type of template. That's a dynamic template that just includes what you need for that particular patient within it. But it's got things like homelessness tabs, it's got alcohol tabs, it's got like whatever's wrong with that patient. It just shows you what you need to do. It's got all the clinical evidence kind of built in. And trying to sort of navigate and narrate people through. So we kind of see it as an educational tool as much as a kind of data recording tool, because it hopefully kind of talks you through what a gold standard review looks like. And then we've got things like an analytics kind of package that it allows you to look at your kind of chronic disease management and think, what am I missing? Once I've hit my percentages with QoF, well, actually, what does my risk tail look like? Like, who are my patients who are not coming in? Who are my patients who are not even picking up their medication? And how long ago did we contact them? And those patients that declined their anticoagulation for AF, like, when did we last ask them about that? Was that last year? Was it 10 years ago? Like, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of trying to tidy up and bring together stuff to improve quality of care and streamline things for people. So it's kind of grown beyond kind of all expectations, really. And I guess as you get bigger like that, you start to think, well, like, it's great that we've got so much content, but actually, how do you make sure that you get the right content in front of the right person at the right time? Because that's the challenge. Because if you've got so much stuff, then the risk is that people kind of dive in and think, yeah, all looks great on the surface, but then actually don't actually get engaged with it and don't actually use it. So that's where we've done quite a lot of thinking about how we can just make stuff as simple as possible, so that it has the most impact and that it gets in front of the right people at the right time.
Cool. So you kind of created this, product, this thing to try and help practices and stuff. How has that then progressed? I mean, to what it is now? What kind of challenges have you faced?
I guess all of those of a kind of a starting company and a growing company. So initially it was just me and Will, and then we had a few people who kind of helped us out on a kind of subcontractor basis when we needed it. But really, for the first kind of 6 or 12 months, it was really just us, and we didn't really. I guess we were quite naive in that we didn't really approach marketing in any kind of way at all. We just kind of, again, quite naively thought, well, if we do good stuff, then people will talk about it and they'll share it, and then we'll just grow organically. And that was exactly what happened over the first kind of 12 months. We just had a kind of slow but steady kind of increase in our customer numbers. And then as you suddenly start to get a bit bigger, you start to think, well, hang on a minute, actually, we've got, we're now up to, I think, 13, 14 members of staff and growing all of it. And you think, okay, so by the time you get to that kind of size, like, how do you structure that? Like any other business, like, who deals with HR issues, who deals with finance issues? Like, how do you make sure that your development team are communicating with your deployment team? How do you make sure that you've got customer facing people who understand exactly what the products are and that they can explain and support people with it? And how do you make sure that you've got all of the tech that kind of supports all of this stuff? So, I mean, like having a service desk, and we've recently gone through GPIT Futures, or currently still going through GPIT Futures
Mhm.
onboarding, and so making sure that your service desk is ITIL compliant, and making sure that you've got all of the different functions that you need to be able to report on all of those different things, and that you've got the categories that assess all of those support tickets that come in, and they're allocated appropriately, all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I guess being a GP, I think you're fairly flexible in your approach, and you can learn new stuff, and you're quite used to change and change management. But even with that being said, it's been quite a journey to kind of get all of that stuff up and running.
Okay. And I guess with those challenges, we've all faced several over the past few months. The biggest disrupting probably, our generation, COVID came along and just
Yeah,
basically said, hi, I'm just going to mess up absolutely everything for everybody.
yeah,
But I know that throughout that, I mean, obviously there's been loads of change in primary care. There is no question on that. I think
yeah,
no other industry has had to change more than healthcare because of COVID and stuff. But I know through that process, one of the things that I often see almost every single week without fail has been these really long and detailed updates from yourself on
yep,
various WhatsApp groups and stuff, and which
yep.
has just collated so much information and resources, and it's just been amazing. But seriously, how do you have the time? I mean, I think I'm productive, but my God, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that was quite interesting how that kind of came about, because I mean it comes back to our kind of core principles, which are just trying to do things that help primary care. And I think it was born of a conversation with myself and our lead development GP, Jez McCall, and we just sat and said to each other one day at the kind of outset of COVID, there's just so much noise and so much stuff, and like how are we supposed to assimilate all this stuff, and like guidelines are changing every minute, and like and I think we just said, well, we've got a website, haven't we? And like actually the website's there, it's got all the kind of structure and functions that we'd need to bring all this stuff together.
Mhm.
And literally one Sunday, I think we just came into the office, or I came into the office, and Jez logged in, and then we just spent the time pulling together what we'd got so far from all the different groups that we're on, because I think probably like you, I'm a member of like a ton of WhatsApp groups, Facebook
Yep.
groups, Twitter, and because of that, there's always stuff coming in and going on, and it was just okay. So let's begin to filter some of that stuff out. Let's figure out how we can categorize it so that people can find what they're looking for, and it kind of makes sense from a kind of GP clinician point of view, or practice manager point of view, or somebody kind of looking for a specific resource point of view. And then let's just put that all onto our website.
Mhm.
And so we kind of came up with a process where if we saw any resources during the course of the day with like notifications and stuff, then we'd just drop them straight to a separate email address, and then that email address then at the end of the day would be full of any resources that have been published that day. And so it meant that we just had a ton of stuff there that we could then get to the end of the day, sit down in the evening, have a look through it ourselves to kind of think, okay, so like this is useful, or this is really key, or this isn't so interesting, or actually I'm not sure about the evidence behind that.
Mhm.
And then kind of bring it together in a summary for people. Yeah, and I don't think, again, on that Sunday, again, slightly naively, I don't think we quite realised what we were biting off when we started that process. Because
Yeah.
I think we just thought, oh, we'll do this, and then it will be there, and that's fine. And then actually realised that no, it's evolving really rapidly, and there's tons of
Yeah.
stuff coming out. And actually, if we're going to be useful, then we can't just do this once and forget about it. It actually needs to be an ongoing process. And I think once we'd committed to doing it, we were like, no, we'll see it through and kind of keep doing that. Yeah, and I mean the volume of traffic to our website just went through the roof. Like we usually,
Yeah.
I think normally on a day before COVID, we'd normally have 20 to 50 visitors on a day. And at one stage, we were up to nearly 3,500 visitors in a day. I think we had 40,000 in the first month after COVID, which we looked at and just went, this is like unheard of. Like,
Yep.
how on earth has this happened?
Mhm.
But I think it was just we saw that we could do it. We thought, why not? And we went for it, and have kind of been going ever since. So.
Yeah, And I think what's interesting is also the process that you use with that. So you mentioned obviously this concept of finding resources, emailing them to a separate place for you to store and
Yep.
then look back on.
Yep.
Interestingly, many of our GP colleagues may find that tip kind of useful for doing something else, their appraisal.
Yeah.
So it's a really good mechanism for having, a repository of the things that you want to keep a hold of. And clearly there's loads of ways you can do that, pen and paper, what kind of stuff. My preferred method is using a tool called Wakelet, which is I find really interesting because it's open resource, and it just, no matter what it is, whether it's a tweet, whether it's an email, that kind of stuff. WhatsApp, I don't think it works quite well with, unfortunately. I may do. I've not tried it with WhatsApp, I've got to admit. But yeah, it's basically having that ability to collate the information, isn't it? And just, have it so that then you can look at it later time and then, okay, fine. But I guess, those resources that you collated, I know were, like I said, on a weekly thing, just, it was there, it was updated, it's like awesome. And I know some areas obviously have their local versions of that. So in Nottingham, we're fortunate we have TeamNet, which is basically a locally created version of everything that you were churning out. And it was interesting because often I'd see some of the stuff that you put out was on there available like a day or two before it was on our local repository. So clearly ahead of the curve. But I guess COVID has changed things, hasn't it? Massively so in primary care. Where do you see kind of the next few months going?
I think we're probably into a bit of a new normal in primary care now, which is why
I hate that term. Absolutely hate it. It's only been about 3 weeks we've been hearing it, and I already hate that term.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's. I think the whole of society has changed, and I think probably people's anything like this, values and kind of attitudes and expectations are all going to be built in at a societal level. And I think primary care is going to have to find its feet kind of embedding within that what we do. And we were chatting before the call, weren't we, sort of saying a lot of our stuff previously has been around calling patients in for routine monitoring and doing that face to face and doing elements of care kind of at that time, which in the current situation when you've got really kind of risky patients who need that kind of monitoring, and they still need that ongoing monitoring, it doesn't feel sensible to bring them into a place where actually there's probably more chance of them catching illness than there is of them benefiting from their chronic disease monitoring. So I think primary care is still, I think we've changed overnight our operating model. Certainly in my practice, it's unrecognisable what we're doing now compared with before COVID. And we've moved an awful long way. I think we're probably all quite naive if we think we haven't got quite a long way further to go with this. Because I think the thing that I'm really conscious of is that we're going to need to continue to evolve to try and do more of our work without seeing patients, certainly in the next 18 months, I imagine. So I think that's probably where most of us feel like we're gearing up for.
And I guess with that, what do you see as the future for primary care pathways with that journey?
So we're evolving with it, I guess. So we've been busy beavering away, looking at how we can try and amend some of our resources to make that easier for people. So we've got a brand new product which we're launching in the next 4 weeks, which will allow remote consultations with patients, which will allow remote reviews with patients, and we'll take them and walk them through a similar journey that they would get if they were coming in for a chronic disease review within the practice. So hopefully that will allow us to collate nearly all of the information that we would have done in a face-to-face review, and then allow the kind of review to be completed with a minimum of contact with the patient, physical contact with the patient. May well be that we'll send the electronic review. Patient will complete it, and then it will come back into the practice, and then somebody in the practice will contact the patient and just chat them through the review and chat through any issues that have happened by phone or by video. But the whole idea of it is that it will mean that we don't necessarily need to have patients coming into the practice, but we can be sure that they've actually been through the usual review process in terms of talking to them about their disease and what it is and what the risks are and what the things that they should be doing are, and also identifying which areas of their disease they're finding challenging and what the impacts of those kind of things are.
And I guess with that, one of the things that people often comment about primary care pathways is it's very much system based. So obviously a lot of your architecture is based on EMIS.
Yeah.
Is that still the plan?
So that's something that's changing. So we had an away day in January this year. So pre-COVID, not even thinking that COVID was even a thing, and as a group met with all of our people and said, what are our key aims as an organisation, and out of that came a kind of what we want to do is provide really useful tools to GPs and their teams and to practice managers, and we just want them to be a useful repository so that practices don't have to do this work themselves. And if there's something that needs to be done, then we want to be the people who can do it and make it as simple and as streamlined for people as we can. And then we did in true educationalist style. We did a bit of a role play, kind of, which certain of our team members really found quite uncomfortable about the future of primary care IT. And one of the groups came back and kind of did it was a post EMIS apocalyptic kind of scene where actually EMIS doesn't exist anymore, and so all the work that we'd put in became meaningless.
Yeah.
And actually challenged that if we were really trying to help practices in our teams, and that was seriously our aim, then why on earth were we just focusing on EMIS practices? Because that's not really focusing on GPs and their teams, it's just focusing on EMIS GPs and their teams. So we had an aim as an organisation to get all of our tools kind of mapped out regardless of whatever system you were using, and then be able to utilise them within other systems as well. So this new tool is system agnostic. You'll be able to use it with whichever system you're using. So that should be a step in the right direction. And then we've been gradually building our kind of resource library of things that we can replicate in other clinical systems.
Okay.
So that will be kind of coming over the next 6 to 12 months, we think.
Awesome. So that's tools for both System 1 and, I guess, Vision?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we want to be covering any clinical system that's out there. We would want to be trying to have the same standard and same quality of tools across those systems. That's our aim ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're constrained by all the usual things that constrain you, like how many hours are there in a day, how much resource have you got to dedicate to the stuff, and how do you continue to grow as an organisation whilst maintaining the quality and making sure that you kind of retain that kind of that useful, friendly feel. You don't want to get to being just another IT supplier who's kind of grown really, really big, but then doesn't have that kind of that relationship with the customer. And I think the key thing with that is making sure that we're still, so all of our clinicians, we still want to be practicing jobbing GPs, because I think as soon as you stop doing that, you kind of lose your link with what it is to be sat in that seat, being that person doing that job, and you just become another IT supplier, which isn't where we want to get to as an organisation.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned earlier about EMIS itself and a potential post-apocalyptic world if EMIS didn't exist.
Yeah.
I guess a couple of years back we heard that EMIS was looking at its next iteration in terms of its product, in terms of EMIS X.
Yeah.
Have you got any news for us on that at all that you can share?
Yeah, I think EMIS are still working on EMIS X. From what I've seen, it looks like there's some seriously fun and seriously clever stuff that they're building into it as it evolves. I don't envy them the task, actually, building an entire clinical system from scratch, and kind of embedding all of the whizzy tools that all of us come to expect in kind of modern day general practice is a big ask. And particularly from when I've been on the users group and you see requests come in for certain things and you implement them, and then you get a whole swathe of other people going, no, I don't like that, it didn't work. And then I did like it was before, and kind of treading that kind of middle road of kind of like, yeah, like we want that as a possibility, but not everybody's going to like it, so we need to be able to turn it off as well. And then you start applying that to a clinical system that's got so many different kind of areas within it, and you think that is a massive job. And having the kind of team to be able to build that and still make sure that it's all traveling in the same direction again is a massive job. So from what I've seen, it looks awesome and dead exciting, and I think will again help to take primary care into the next kind of leap forward that we go through. I think when EMIS Web came out, it was a massive step forward in terms of the functionality from LV, and it allowed us to do an awful lot more stuff to improve quality of patient care that we'd never been able to do before. I think this is probably going to again catapult us a little bit further again.
Cool. And hopefully won't be, I guess, another version of EMIS PCS, because many of our GP learners know I'm a System 1 nut, because that's the system I've kind of grown up with. But what people don't know is I have actually used all three versions of EMIS as well. And definitely EMIS Web is probably the most user-friendly. I actually preferred EMIS LV over EMIS PCS. I could not stand PCS at all. In fact, I only had to use it when I was locuming, and it got to the point where I just wouldn't locum in those practices because it just frustrated me so much. And that's saying something compared to EMIS LV, which is obviously a DOS-based system. I mean, it was literally just text input, and that was it. But still more powerful in my view than what PCS was. So fingers crossed, it'll be a better iteration and not another EMIS PCS.
Well, I think they're working hard at making sure that, and they've done a lot of listening to customers. So we've spoken to them repeatedly about the kind of areas that we're interested in, so protocols and templates and those kind of things. And I know they've done an awful lot of engagement with various different users in various different settings to try and make sure that they capture all of the kind of like the ideas and the wants for the functionality.
Cool. So I guess if people did want to find out more about primary care pathways and the stuff you've been up to, where would you suggest they go to?
Probably drop onto our website, so primarycarepathways.co.uk, or drop us an email at the team at primarycaret.co.uk, or dive onto our Facebook groups. So we've got a Facebook group which is for anybody who's using any clinical system, and we've got one particularly for subscribers. So if you're a subscriber already, dive onto the subscribers one and the general one. And if you just want to know some more about our stuff, just dive onto the general one, and we do quite regular webinars, which you can have a look at some of our stuff on, and they're not just about our stuff at all. They're about just generally using clinical systems and how to get the most out to them. So we've got another one coming up in a few weeks' time, which we're doing on just getting started in protocols in EMIS. And our last one was about complex protocols in EMIS, because that was what a lot of our users were telling us that they wanted. But those kind of things, you'll get a feel for what we're about and what we're up to.
Definitely. I'll stick all those links down in the show notes for our GP learners to have a look at, and including the COVID one, which, like I said, for me has been an absolute amazing resource to look at and to find just information, So,
Quite a lot of your stuff is featured in it as well.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that, but thank you for saying that. But also, I was every time I checked, I was like, oh my God, he's got that video. Cool. Awesome. So thank you, Dustyn, for joining us. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Always do, every single time, but definitely having this opportunity to share the work that you've been doing, particularly for primary care, and especially over the past few months, how much of benefit's been for GPs, primary care, and everything. Really, really valued it, and thank you is what I wanted to say. Basically, from a lot of people I've spoken to about trying to get you onto the podcast, they've always said, just make sure you say thanks.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
And definitely, EGP learners, if you do have any comments or questions, feel free to contact whichever method you prefer. As you know, I'm on all various different social media platforms and that kind of stuff. If you are listening on our podcast, definitely make sure you subscribe and leave us a review. Always love it when we see that. And if you're watching on YouTube, definitely make sure you ring the bell and get subscribed so that you can get all of our content first and foremost. And as always, EGP Learning is here to help save you and your patients time by taking hands in your primary care and learning. We'll catch you in the next episode.